And if you are trying to build a strategy for that one, you're going to die through decision paralysis. That is not the right way to go about it. But let's take it back a bit here. There has been no shortage of technology companies springing up. I was about to say in the last few years, but those who are old enough to see the dot-com bubble will also know this is not the first time we see the emergence of a large number of tech companies. If we compare to other industries, like the financial tech companies, it actually appears that we are a relatively small industry. Does that mean that we're missing a lot of solutions? Are people not innovative enough in this industry? Not necessarily. The financial industry is just a lot more diverse, and to be blunt, there's a lot more money in it when you compare over on the freight tech side. If you look at the container shipping lines alone, they have been perennially loss-making for 20 years. That, of course, places a limit as to how much money is actually available to even do anything. But if we then drill into it and say, what is actually happening in the freight tech space? And again, if we think of this from the end-to-end perspective, there's a lot happening. And I would go as far as to say every conceivable process, right from the point of loading the container, even building the container itself, to making the bookings, to moving stuff, to transshipping it, to handling customs, to paying at the end of the day, every conceivable process, there is a handful of different freight tech companies out there saying, we can digitize and automate this. Plenty to choose from there. So from that perspective, sure, there's technology catering for the end-to-end, but is there any one of these that handles the entire thing? Not really, right? But let's take a step back here. Say, in all this talk about freight tech companies and what can we automate and can we handle the end-to-end process, what is the ultimate objective? Why are we here as an industry? Because that's really where we need to start. And if we do that, we find out this is actually an extraordinarily simple industry. This is all we need to know. We got an exporter that needs to get stuff moved on time in accordance with agreement without damaging the goods to whoever needs it somewhere else. There really is nothing else to it. That's all. That is the origin of all demand. The demand for vessel capacity is derived from this. The demand for how many moves do we need per crane in a port is derived from this. The demand for how quickly do we need to move cargo in the intermodal chain is derived from, everything is derived from this. So if you really want to talk about end-to-end, this is it. These are the two endpoints. That's all there is to it. The problem, of course, as you all well know, appears when we start to look a little bit into these two boxes. This is where life suddenly explodes, right? Because in between the exporter, which is way over there, do we have a point on this one? Yeah, in between the exporter and the importer, we have this. But again, no, that's not really true, is it? You also know, all of you, that this is an extremely simplified chart. If we wanted to put everything in there, we would not have enough slides in the world to actually fill it up. But the poor exporter probably deals with a forwarder and a trucker, goes to a container depot, we go through a port, we include a carrier, the stevedoring is in there, we probably need to get transshipped. We've got a few different vessel operators operating on various vessel sharing agreements. They go to another port, we engage the rail, we go back to the container depot. Hey, by the way, there's a health inspection because I'm shipping foodstuffs, and so on and so on and so on. Where's the end-to-end solution? Well, let me put it differently. If you want to design an end-to-end solution, whose end-to-end solution are we talking about? Are we talking about the end-to-end solution that makes sure that from the point where a vessel is approaching a port until the cargo is gated out? For some, that would be end-to-end. Or is it end-to-end from the perspective of going through the transshipment points as well? Or is it end-to-end including that we need to pay for it? There's probably an SAP system somewhere there as well. What is end-to-end? That is in the eye of the beholder. That depends on what particular problem are we trying to solve. And then we are kind of back to the point I was also trying to make in the last session of yesterday. Anybody who thinks that we can build one single platform that does all of this, I think the diplomatic term would be delusional. It's not going to happen. Yes, we can probably make a huge theoretical argument why that would be the most efficient way of handling it, but it would be a big white elephant. It would never get built, and before it ever was built, this landscape has changed. Now we've got more stakeholders coming in, we've got more regulations, some of those have disappeared. So from an end-to-end perspective, if we try to design a digital strategy that says we need one platform to do it all, we are bound to fail. The approach we really should consider is, what is our end-to-end vision? And if we take it back to say, well, here at this forum, we're mainly talking ports, right? So the port would have to say, what is our end-to-end vision? Where does it begin? Where does it end? That is the discussion we need to have first. As a port, is it from the perspective of when are the vessels at least approaching my port until they depart? Is it from the perspective of having the cargo moved through my port? Is it from the perspective of the actual cargo? Because in that case, not enough for me to look at my own port. I need to look at cargo that get gated in at a port 8,000 miles away. Is it including the hinterland, in which case I actually need to think about my nearby competitors where we are overlapping on the hinterland infrastructure? There's not one single answer to that. It also, as I said yesterday, depends very much upon who you are as a port. I've had the privilege here just during the last year to work both for 2 of the 5 largest ports in Asia, as well as 2 very, very small ports in Africa, and a number of ports in between. None of them clearly need the same. None of them can live with one single definition of what is end-to-end. It's all down to a contextualized process saying, where are we? Then we can define for us what is the end-to-end. And once that is defined, then the next step is not getting into paralysis by saying, okay, if this is our end-to-end vision, let's build that, because that would also be folly. It's necessary to have that vision, where do we want to end up? But don't try to build the whole thing. Go for the modular approach. Go and say, fine, given that, what are available tools already out there? What are some of the subcomponents we might want to build ourselves, because we might have a few special things we want to have handled here? But be prepared for the fact that no matter what you put into that practical work chain right now, 2 or 3 years from now, it will be obsolete. Either because there's better technology coming about, but more likely because we're going to see the slow emergence of different standards. You're going to have to adapt to that. And yes, some ports might get lucky that the stuff they're developing right now will end up setting some of the de facto standards. That is most likely the case for maybe some of the very largest ports, if they're lucky. For most, it will be a matter of saying, we need to be sufficiently agile. We cannot build a system that we're then going to say, that is great, we're going to depreciate it over the next 10 years. We're going to be in trouble. It's more a matter of saying, do we have a business case for getting a relatively quick return on this? And what happens if the world changes and we throw it overboard? Are we sufficiently agile to actually take the next thing on board? So going back to where I started this thing, end-to-end, no, you're not going to get that one system covering end-to-end. But what you should do is, first of all, what does end-to-end mean to me? What is realistic? And secondly, what are smaller agile components I can use in the pursuit of my own end-to-end vision? But don't try to build the whole thing.